Today's parasha is Korach. It's almost like a repeat of last week's parasha, to be honest, in terms of the theme. You've got the people of Israel that are just rising up against Moses and Aaron. And for whatever reason, that's human nature. Human nature is that we want to do what's contrary to God. God establishes something that we don't necessarily, we didn't ask for it because it's God's plan, not our plan. And for whatever reason, we want to circumvent God's plan and do it ourselves because we think we have a better plan. We think we can do it better. That's the story of the last couple of weeks, to be honest. You've got, the issue here with Korach. Korach believes that Moses and Aaron really have no idea what they're doing. They're leading these people in the wilderness. They get upset. Korach, who's a great leader in his community, grabs the chieftains of Israel and 250 men. And 250 men come together with their tribes and their people and, try to sway the people to follow them versus following Moses and Aaron. Well, it wasn't Moses and Aaron's choice. I mean, that's the interesting part of this. You have a group of people that are going contrary to what God has created on their own, believing that they can do it better than what God has planned it. So God planned Moses, and Moses, quite frankly, didn't even want it. Moses didn't want the job. Aaron didn't ask for the job. In fact, Moses said, these aren't even my people. I'm out here, I'm fighting for these people. These are your people, God. And God says, He calls him, He draws him out, He uses him, and there's a reason why, right? Most of the time when people don't want to do something, God can use them better because they're not taking the glory and the credit for it. If you really want to do it, if you really want the role, then how can God truly use you and bless you? Because you're going to start believing that it's through your power, through your ability, that you're able to do the things that you're doing. Moses, frankly, knew that this wasn't him. I mean, this was God. Everything that was going on was God. All the miracles that have occurred, from leaving the wilderness and achieving the Exodus, this was new. This wasn't him. Aaron didn't ask for it. His sons definitely didn't ask for it. Imagine you're the son of Aaron. God tells Aaron, you and your sons are going to be the priests. Literally, the Bible says that you will bear the iniquity of the service of the temple. What? You will bear the iniquity of the service of the temple. It wasn't you will bear the blessing of the service of the temple. This wasn't a great opportunity. This was going to be a very difficult life for Aaron and for his sons. For whatever reason in the church today, we've turned it around. We've turned it into something where guys and men, pastors and leaders, they get, it's this blessing. For Aaron and his sons, this was bearing an iniquity. It's your responsibility to bear the sins of all of the people, to sacrifice, to be covered in blood every single day. No one wanted that job. You see the show on TV, Dirty Jobs, with somebody, I forget his name. But it's like cleaning toilets. You want to go clean the latrine? I don't. These guys have a very serious job. Stephen had a message, I don't know if it was last week's or the week before, where he showed the temple. That was last week, right? And in the description of the temple, he starts to talk about where the sacrifices are made in the holy place, and then going into the Holy of Holies. We all know that the only person that goes into the Holy of Holies is Aaron, right? So most of the people are going to be hanging out in the outer courts, and there's a lot of sacrifices being made in the outer courts. Stephen talked about that. Those sacrifices aren't just sacrifices for sin. They're gift offerings. There's love offerings. There's all kinds of different offerings. You can bring a turtle dove, or you can bring a calf. Somebody brings a small turtle dove and wants it sacrificed. There's got to be a priest standing there to cut its throat. So somebody brings a calf, a cow or a lamb. They bring a lamb to sacrifice a lamb. There's got to be a priest there to cut its throat and bleed it out. I mean, it's not a good job. But these men felt like it was the leadership role, like that they were the ones that were going to be able to do this, and they were going to go contrary to God. They were going to say, God, Moses and Aaron, you're not hearing from God. This is what is the most interesting thing ever. If I think through this, it's been thousands of years since the children of Israel have made their exodus from Egypt into the wilderness. God rescued them from the grip of Pharaoh. He pulled them out of the grip of a foreign land. And they were launched into this experience that God decided to give them, that was going to guide not only the house of Israel, it was going to guide not only the Jewish people, it was going to guide the rest of the world. The entire world was now going to be guided as a result of the experience that the children of Israel were about to embark, the journey that they were about to take. Everyone who's a believer, your experience, your journey has been defined through this process of the children of Israel being led out of this wilderness, into the wilderness and out of this Egypt. We're a product of the journey of Israel. Through the physical experiences of the people of Israel in the scriptures, we gain knowledge about our lives personally, about how we interact with each other, about how we interact with God. Spiritually, we're provided a compass that directs us to keep the covenants of God satisfied and intact. Dad and Stephen have been talking for the last few weeks about really foundational teachings about who we are, okay? Why we do what we do. They're very foundational. Why are you what you are? And why do you keep the Shabbat? And why do you keep the feasts of God? And, what is the purpose for us? And they've taken us into the scriptures and created a roadmap for us to understand why we do what we do. It's really gives you the ability to defend your faith. Apologetics in front of a believer or a Christian who thinks that all of this stuff is done away. It gives you the ability to say, well, listen, this is why. It's very clear. It's in the scriptures. It's our foundational teachings. But the experiences of the people of Israel should be defining your future, because that's where it starts. It starts with them. So it defines the rest of the generations. It defines the from there to now. God put together a roadmap. He put together a compass to direct the lives of his people. And we have to keep those covenants, keep those commands that he has established. I was talking yesterday to a gentleman at work. He was telling me that, he's very stressed out. He's been on blood pressure medicine, and then he was able to get off, but now he doesn't want to go back on it because he was able to get off of it. And he was laying in bed one night and he was sleeping. And he heard while he was sleeping, he was kind of tossing and turning, and he knew he was stressed out, but in his spirit he heard, I am your caregiver. I care for you. Cast your cares on me. And he said the Spirit of God filled the room, and he was able to lay down and go back to bed. And he said the Spirit of God is mighty, and I know it is, and it really brings peace to me. And I said, yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, the Spirit of God is mighty, and it brings us peace. And we started talking a bit about, following the Lord. And I asked him, well, what does it mean to follow? And he says, if you love me, keep my commandments, Yeshua said. If you love me, keep my commandments. Well, what are his commandments? So we talked a little bit about the 10 Commandments. We talked a bit about the commandments in the Old Testament. I said to him, "Well, are you a priest?" He said, "No, I'm not a priest." I said, "Are you a woman?" He said, "No, I'm not a woman." I said, "Well, there's 613 commandments in the Tanakh. Of the 613 commandments, a couple hundred relate just to women. Okay? Men don't even pertain to those commandments. There's a few of those 613, more than a few, that pertain only to kings. Then there's a few of those that pertain to princes and various different occupations. So not all of those 613 commands pertain to everyone. So when we say we keep the law, there's no way that I can possibly keep 613 commandments. There's positive commandments and negative commands, right? I can't keep all of them because they all don't pertain to me. Let me ask you a very, very simple question. Will I ever menstruate? Never. So I'll never have to go into a body of or a pool of water that's flowing and keep myself away from the community. I'll never have to have that it'll never be addressed to me. So that's just to be stark, right? Just to show the contrast. Even the Old Testament broke it down pretty simple for us. There were just 10 that really Moses brought to the people. Why did he bring those 10? Because they were communal. Those 10 were communal. It applied to everyone. And they cover everything. Yeshua broke it down even more simple. He said there are 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. We've got 2 commandments, right, that really break it down. The church has taken the simplicity that Yeshua has brought to the table, and even Paul, they've taken the simplicity, and in their simplicity, they've lost the detail of what the thrust of those commands really do. The first one, and love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. What are you going to do if you do that? You're going to try to figure out who he is and learn about him. If you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. You're going to want to learn about your God. And as you learn about your God, you're going to hear that your God tells you to do certain things. Keep the Shabbat. Well, what is keeping the Shabbat? I don't know how we keep it. This is how we keep it. I know the commandment says, remember the Shabbat to keep it holy. Fine. This is how we do it. I don't know if that's what it meant or not, but this is how we do it, right? The Talmud talks about how they did it and how they want us to do it, and we've got a combination of that. But the point is that you want to try to do your best to serve God. So you love the Lord your God, your soul, and mind. You're not going to put any other God before him. If you love him, you won't put any other God before him, so you're not going to be breaking that commandment. In the end, it's all-encompassing. Love your neighbor as yourself. I'm not going to steal from you. I'm not going to steal from you because I don't want to be stolen from. So there's details that we lose by making things very simple. But the problem is that during the first century, they were so caught up in the details that they couldn't see the simplicity. Today, we're so caught up in the simplicity that we can't see the details. It's the opposite problem. We're so caught up in breaking God down into this very simple thing that everything becomes okay. God is open to all things. Churches are flying gay pride flags outside their churches. They're accepting these types of things. Very clear in the scriptures that God says this is an abomination. It's very clear. I'm not saying anything that's not wrong. It's very clear. I'm saying what the Bible says. And if you choose to believe the Bible, then you have to follow that. But we're open because things are simple. They've taken love your neighbor as yourself, and they say love all people no matter what is going on in their lives or what they're doing, and God will work that out with them. Come on. I agree with everyone that we should love everyone. Love everyone. I've heard it my whole life. You love the person, you hate the sin. You love the person, you hate the sin. They say it everywhere. Churches, synagogues, everywhere. Love the person, hate the sin. Of course. Love the person, hate the sin. But that doesn't justify us accepting it when it's wrong, according to the Scriptures. Keeping and following commandments in the covenant of God. What does it truly mean? Korach was going against him. This guy was a part of an experience. They pulled out of Egypt. They're pulled out of this foreign land. They saw waters part. They walked on dry land. They saw the lightning and the thundering. In fact, the 250 men were part of the group of people that said, Moses, you go talk to God. We don't want to, lest we die. Remember all this. They were scared just a few, years ago or months ago or however long it was. They're frightened. Now all of a sudden, they're no longer frightened. We're the leaders of the people. We can lead these people. And we can be the representatives of God. How is it possible to understand how we as human beings act? How short our memories are. There's a great Jewish leader in the history of time called the Baal Shem Tov. He responds to the fact that Moses states that we, the children of Israel, are a holy people before the Lord. He responds by saying that God gives physical form to the spiritual. And the Jewish person, the Jew, makes spiritual the physical. Now let's break that down. How many of you believe that you've always existed? Does anyone here believe that you are always in existence? That your soul was with God before it was a man? This is what the Jewish people believe. Okay? Your soul always was. It's a part of God. He breathed you into a physical form. So the spiritual, which was the spiritual, every one of you believe that you're going to live forever. How many of you believe you're going to live forever? Whether you believe you're going to live in heaven or you're going to live in hell, you believe you're going to live forever. Okay? And if you don't believe you're going to live forever, then you're in the wrong spot, because we believe that. So doors behind you. That's a basic foundation, right? We believe in that. We believe the soul is forever. It's eternal. God gave physical form to the soul. He made a body out of the dust of the earth and put the soul into, the nephesh, into the body. Now, the body can either control the soul or the spirit, or the soul or the spirit, the nephesh, can control the body. You guys remember the discussion with Paul? My members do their own thing. I've got to keep my members in subjection. What does he mean by his members? His fingers, his hands, his feet, his eyes, his ears, the things he hears, the things he sees, the things he does with his hands, the places that he walks and he travels to. He's got to keep his body into subjection by his spirit. He's got to strengthen his spirit to control his body, because his body wants to do something different than his spirit. It's the craziest thing in the world that you can have a physical form and a spiritual form, and both of them can think two different ways. And your spirit can want to take you here, and your body can want to take you here, and you feel the tearing away of your flesh and your spirit. It's a tearing away. Might want to go here, but your spirit's running that way, and you're fighting it. Imagine it's a tearing away. And all of a sudden, you fall into sin. And what does it do? It brings a feeling of disconnection. You're disconnected from the eternal God. and your spirit weeps and mourns. And inside you feel terrible. And so your spirit brings you back into the presence of God. Through prayer, through asking of forgiveness, through vexing your soul, through beating your chest, whatever it is you do. I don't know what you do, but everyone's different. If you feel you need to flog yourself, then that's what you feel you need to do. Everybody's different. But somehow our spirits bring us back in line with God. And that fight happens every single day. So he gives physical form to the spiritual, and the Jew makes the spiritual physical. We have to bring the spiritual, which is inside of us, to the outside so that we can become a conduit for the presence of God in the earth to those who do not have it. God's taken what is natural and real, the spirit. That is the real. That's reality. We think we're living in reality. Reality is the spiritual. The spiritual is what was, and what is, and what will always be. The spiritual is the forever. This is a temporal life we live in. The physical is not the forever. It's the spiritual that will be the forever. We will be transformed in the physical to the tune of what God decides we will be on the spiritual. This physical world will be transformed. There will be a new world. There will be a new heaven. There will be a new earth. And it will be the picture of what is in the spirit. It will not be this. He's wrapped the natural, spiritual in a physical package. He's put the word on stone tablets. Think about it. He took the spiritual, which was the word, and he put it, engraved it in stone. He made it physical. He took the word, which was spiritual, and engraved it in stone and made it a physical thing. He took the Mashiach, which is a spirit, which is the Spirit of God, which is the presence of God, which is the voice of God. He took the Mashiach, the voice of God, and made him physical in the process of Yeshua, the Messiah. John 1:1, we say it every single Shabbat. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. Yeshua is this Word. Yeshua was at the beginning of time. God said, let us make that man in our own image. He's talking to Yeshua. The voice which comes out of God is Yeshua. When God spoke to Moses, remember the movie? Moshe, Moses, right? Remember that? The actual sound, the voice, that's Yeshua talking. That's Yeshua. He's the voice of God. He's the Word. When God engraved the commandments into stone, that engraving is Yeshua. Was Yeshua in the Old Testament? You better believe it. He's the God of gods, the King of kings, Melech HaMelakim. He's in the stone tablets. He's in the physical. He comes as Yeshua as the Mashiach in the physical. It's man's requirement. It's our great honor to take the physical and live it as if it were the spiritual. It's our great honor that God gives us the ability to live out the spiritual in the physical. Living from the inside out, allowing the true nature of man to expand out into the earth and bring about good. Or bring about evil. Whichever you're inclined to do. But the spiritual is good, and it's there's evil in the spirit and there's good in the spirit. And which one are we following? There's an inclination to do good and an inclination to do Yetzer Hara, Yetzer HaTov. We've talked about it a million times. Both products of our actions, whether they're good or whether they're evil, are the result of our spiritual desires. In the Scriptures, you'll find that the Lord promises His people specific life outcomes. He promises them a blessing or a curse based upon their commitment, based on their devotion to His statutes and judgments. The Lord promises a blessing or a curse based upon your life, based upon your decisions and your actions. That is a literal fact. If you act out this way and inclined to do evil, you are destined for cursing. If you are inclined to do good, you are destined for blessing. That's a fact. Not only is it scriptural, not only is it God saying that to His people, the rest of the world today recognizes that if you do good, generally you get good. And if you do evil, generally you receive evil. That's a basic general reality for all man. They haven't taken it, translated it necessarily into the fact that this is God blessing you or God cursing you. Those of us who follow the Master of Legions and King of Kings and the ruler of all the world believe that He's in control of all man. We believe that He's in control of even those who are evil and wicked and good. He's in control of all, and the result of everyone's life is the result of what God has given them to either bring them back into His presence or send them further away from Him. Now that doesn't sound very good, right? Why would God send someone further away from Him? He did it to Pharaoh. He will push them away. He will push them away, and He will push them away. If He knows that the inclination of that man is continually evil, is continually wicked, He will continually push them away. God knows greater than all of us what our inclinations are, whether or not we're good or whether or not we're evil, and He will judge us based upon those things. Based upon Deuteronomy 11, it presents a basic outline for us to follow to realize God's blessing in this life. So let's begin at verse 1. 11:1. Therefore thou shalt love the Lord your God, keep His charge, keep His statutes and His judgments and His commandments always. Know ye this day, for I speak not with your children, which have not known, and which have not seen the chastisement of the Lord your God, His greatness, His mighty hand, and His stretched out arm, and His miracles, and His acts, which He did in the midst of Egypt unto Pharaoh the king of Egypt, and unto all his land. And what He did unto the army of Egypt, unto their horses, unto their chariots, how He made the water of the Red Sea to overflow them as they pursued after you, how the Lord hath destroyed them unto this day, and what He did unto you in the wilderness until you came into this place, and what He did unto Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, the son of Reuben. You guys read the parashah. Dathan and Abiram were two guys that were integral in this Korach rebellion. Okay? They were integral in that process. How the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their households and their tents and all the substances that was in their possessions in the midst of all of Israel. How the earth opened up. This is the whole Korach rebellion. God's telling these people in Deuteronomy 11, I'm not talking to your children, because your children didn't see all of this stuff. You saw it. You saw the miracles. You saw the things I've done. You even saw that when Korach raised up against me, not Moses, not Aaron, you understand that, right? They rose up against Moses and Aaron, but in reality they rose up against God. And he's saying, when they rose up against me, and Moses prays, the one who's the true prophet of God, may the earth open up and swallow the other one up. So here it comes. The earth literally opens up and swallows these men, their households, their tents, the substances that were in their possession in the midst of all of Israel. God was not about to allow his prophet that he chose to be overrun. What kind of God would he be? What kind of strength and power would he have if he allowed this little old group of men, this Dathan and Abiram, these 250 chieftains of Israel, and Korach, allow them to take what God had established? But he says, keep ye all the commandments which I command you this day, that ye may be strong, and go in and possess the land, whither ye go to possess it, and that ye may prolong your days in the land, which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give unto them and to their seed, and the land that floweth with milk and honey. Literally says, you keep the commandments to prolong your days in the land. That means that you will have the land for a long time. As long as you follow my ways, I will protect you. I will keep you. I will keep charge over you. I will make you strong. I will go before you. You can cast your cares on me. For the land, whither thou goest in to possess it, is not as the land of Egypt from whence you came, where you sowed thy seed and waterest thy foot, as the garden of herbs. But the land, whither you go to possess it, is a land of hills and valleys, that drinketh of water of the rain of heaven, and which the Lord thy God cares for. The eyes of the Lord thy God are always upon it, from the beginning of the year even unto the end of the year. Literally, the Bible says that the Lord's eyes are always upon the land. The land. Why? People say, well, there's no holiness to possessions or to things or to places. The Bible literally says that the land is raised up in the eyes of God. And that he will always have his eyes on it. And whether or not you keep his commandments will determine whether you live where he keeps his eyes. And I can tell you, when you're in the land, you feel it. You feel his presence. You feel that God, his eyes are on this land. You feel like you're in God's land. And you have the right to be a part of that as his children. It's like when I go to my parents' house. I go to my dad and mom's house. I feel like that's my inherent part of my home. I'm not going to my parents' house. That's where my parents live. I'm not going where they live. I'm going to my home because it's a part of me. If they decide to move in next door, which they're trying to think about doing, guess what? It's my home. It's not going to feel any different. But when I come to your house, I'm not going to feel like necessarily it's my home. Because it's your house. When you go to Israel, if you're not in relationship with God, guess what? You're going to his home. But when you're in relationship with God the Father, you're going to your home. Because it's your Father's home. There's an inheritance. There's a blessing for those who keep the commandments and follow them. For those that do what? Honor the Shabbat. For those that do what? Keep the feasts of God. For those that do what? The things which God commanded us to do forever and always. The Bible says forever and always, continually, as memorials or as Shabbatons or whatever they may be. You are continual going to do these things. How is it in the world that we've decided that the Bible's words don't mean anything? The church today is in a Korach rebellion. There's chieftains in the church that have decided to say that the commandments of God are null and void. To follow the feasts of God and to keep and honor the Shabbat is pointless. You don't need to keep the Shabbat the way the Jewish people did it. You know how the Jewish people kept the Shabbat? The way God told them to. Not the way they want to. Not the way they've decided to. The way God told them to keep the Shabbat. You know why the Jewish people keep the feasts of the God? Because God told them to keep the feasts of God. The church looks at them and says, you don't have to do that. You don't? Datan and Aviram? You don't, chieftain of Israel, who's decided that what God commanded is no longer necessary? It's no different from deciding that Moses is no longer the prophet of God. The church has said Moses is no longer the prophet of God, and we do not have to follow Moses. That's what the church says. That's why the church doesn't follow Moses. We're in Korach's rebellion. It's the same thing. The difference is the earth hasn't swallowed people up. So we think it's okay. The moment the earth opened up and swallowed them up, all of a sudden, guess what? Everybody's going to keep Shabbat. Everybody's going to be going to the feast of God. Everybody. There's not a soul that won't be at a Passover. Everyone's going to be keeping Sukkot. Yom Kippur, I'll be there. Why? Well, did you see the earth swallow that man up for saying you don't have to do that? Think about it. If we were in those days today, if we weren't in a period of grace, we'd be in a completely different world. But we're in the time of grace. We're in the time where God's allowing man to wrestle with God, right? He's allowing Israel to develop. That's what Jacob was. Today the church is like Jacob, wrestling with God. Trying to figure out, do we believe in what you inspired Moses to communicate, or do we not? Should we do this or should we do that? Should we believe in this man and their interpretation? Understand that mostly churches mostly are the following of men. Understand that most denominations are the followers of men, because those men interpreted the scripture a certain way and it made sense to a group of other men and they've decided to follow it. So basically, Datan and Aviram and the 250 chieftains have decided that this is how we want to interpret things, and we're going to follow it because this is how we interpret it, and you guys should follow us because our interpretation is better. That's basically what's happened in the world today. It's better than what Moses said, because we think Moses is outdated. We think the guy that God chose to change the world, to change your life forever, to inspire the bringing about of the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, that guy Moses, we think he's outdated and his interpretations are old. And God's got a new thing. And you hear it. God's got a new thing. He's got a new way. He's got a new way to follow, and it's this way. No, God is an ancient God. God's been around for a long, long time, forever. What that means is that He's had a lot of time to think about what should be done and not be done, and how it should be done. That's what that means. That means that He's had a lot of time to sit back and think what He will tell His people to do and how they should do it, because He's God. He's thought about it. He's not a God that evolves and says, well, you know what? People are changing today. People are different nowadays. So we have to accept things, because people are different. Are you kidding? I see more and more. I saw this girl the other day with a tattoo on her back that big that said that was the coexist thing. And it's all over vehicles, it's all over cars. Everybody's doing this coexist thing, right? We've got to be super, super duper accepting of everyone. And it's not that I'm not accepting of everybody. I'm accepting of every person. I love everyone. I mean, I have, friends in all different places of all types and shapes and sizes and followings and, whether they're gay or whether they're straight or whether they're this or that. I've got no issue talking to people. Some people will have a problem with that. I don't care about talking to them or sharing dialogue or speaking or enjoying conversation with them. I have no issue with that at all. It doesn't stress me out. We were just talking about the other day with Brian, we went to lunch. Brian's sitting at the table. We went to lunch with a colleague, and they ordered shrimp. Brian's struggling inside because they ordered shrimp. He's like feeling bad that he's sitting at a table that has shrimp at it. I care less. It doesn't bother me one bit. I'll sniff the shrimp. It doesn't bother me. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. You want shrimp? Eat shrimp. That's your life. It's not mine. It's not mine. Me and my house will follow God's ways. But when I'm out in the world, what do you expect? They're going to order it. And you're going to have to accept it. Brian had to go home and flog his back 15 times because he went to dinner, lunch with someone who had shrimp. I mean, that's no way to live. But think about it. You can be whoever you want to be. It doesn't faze me one bit. I have to be who God told me to be. I have to be. And my family will be raised who God told me to be because I'm the head of my home. Each one of you have to follow God. We encourage you to continue to follow God and teach you the scriptures and say, listen, this is what God expects of us. But if you go out and choose not to do so, what am I going to do? What can we do? We can only do what is inside of us to do. You're either inclined to do wicked or inclined to do good. You choose one way. Whose fault is that? It's not mine. I will not be standing next to you. My dad will not be standing next to you. Stephen will not be standing next to you. And I'm going to be standing alone for myself. Nobody will be standing next to me, helping me in the end days when I stand before God. No one will say, yeah, but his heart was right. Yeah, he did those things. But listen, I think you should let him go. And there's no one doing that. It's just me and God. I have no advocate except for, me and God. And guess who's the one judging? It's Yeshua. The Bible literally says, the New Testament says that God has given the scepter of judgment to his Son. Everybody thinks that Jesus is the one full of grace. But do you understand that Jesus is the one that's going to be separating the wheat from the chaff? He's going to be separating the tares and the wheat and the goats and the sheep. He's going to be angry. He's going to be the God of judgment. Everybody thinks the God of the Old Testament is a judging God. You just wait until that Messiah returns. With his eyes red with fire, his hair white like snow, holding a scepter of justice. I mean, think about that. Yes, he came in sackcloth and ashes and was wearing Birkenstocks and had no place to lay his head. And everybody thinks that who Jesus was. No, Jesus was showing you the love and mercy which is deep within God. God cannot be a loving God with having both judgment and mercy. He has to have both. He brought the mercy and the love, but he will bring judgment if you reject his love and mercy and his grace. He will bring judgment for it. Moses is saying in chapter 11, these sayings of Moses, they're not conjectured by him. They're established by God himself. He's making the point that the children of Israel should not doubt him because of what they had experienced in the wilderness. Moses didn't write these words. I hear it all the time. Well, men wrote the Bible. Men wrote the Bible. You can believe in the Bible if you want. Man wrote the Bible. Okay. I choose to believe the Bible was written by God. The Torah specifically. The Torah specifically. I do separate that. That had to be given by God. You got an Egyptian dude, Moses, who was an Egyptian for all intents and purposes, raised by the Egyptian Pharaoh's daughter. Egyptian guy, didn't even know he was Jewish probably till he was older. Then he comes to understand that he's Jewish. He murders this little, guy. He runs away. He's freaking out. You honestly think that he's going to write any of the stuff that's here without having God tell him? That wouldn't have been in him. It's a miracle. Chapter 13, verse 1 says, "If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spoke unto thee, saying, Let us go after other gods, which thou hast not known, and let us serve them, thou shalt not hearken unto the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God proveth you to know whether ye love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And ye shall walk after the Lord your God, and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice, and ye shall serve him and cleave unto him." God wants you to serve him. And he uses Moses as a catalyst for his people. There was a rebellion against Moses. A rebellion. I want you to know that what Dad and Stephen has been teaching you is Moses. The last few weeks, they've been teaching you Moses. When the church says we're not under the law, they're saying we're not under Moses. This stuff that we've been learning is Moses. I'm telling you, we can't be like Korach and the rebellion. We can't be like Datan and Aviram. We can't be like the 250 chieftains of Israel. We have to follow what God has established through his prophet Moses. That Yeshua, the Messiah, confirms, because guess what the prophet Moses was giving you? Yeshua himself. He was the Word. People say, what do you mean that he was the Word? How can, Yeshua, the New Testament replaces the Old Testament? The New Testament is a commentary on the Old Testament outside of the Gospels. Outside of the Gospels, it's a commentary. It does exactly what I'm doing for you right now. I'm telling you, within the context of the Torah, how to live your life. That's what I'm telling you. That's what Paul does. Within the context of the Torah and the prophets, he tells you how to live your life. Whether you're in the state of Corinth, or in the state of Rome, or in the state of Thessalonica, wherever you may live, whatever you're dealing with, Paul is trying to bring to you an understanding of the Torah and the prophets so that you can deal with issues. The church today, everybody says the church today is more like Corinth, right? We're like the Corinthian church. So if you read Corinthians, you could relate to the Corinthians. But if you read Romans, it's difficult for you to relate to the Romans, except for those of you who are, in fact, Italian. You may be able to relate to the Romans better. Or if you're from Thessalonica, or if you're Greek, or whatever you may be, you may be able to relate to those better. The reality is it's a commentary. But in the Gospels, there are red letters. Those red letters, basically the Torah. Anything that spews out of the mouth of Yeshua is the Torah. I literally saw on Facebook 2 weeks ago, I literally saw they're selling Paul's original King James Bible. It's nonsense. King James wasn't even close to being around, right? How many years? From Paul to King James? What? 1,600 years. Stephen's my phone a friend. I mean, how could Paul have a King James Bible if King James didn't come about until 1,600 years later? You understand that for 1,600 years, there was no Bible the way you were holding it. For 1,600 years, there was no Bible the way you're holding it in your hand. There were scrolls that were the Torah. There were scrolls that were the prophets. There were letters being tossed about between, towns on behalf of people. Literally, let's say I write a letter to my mom and I call it Ima. There's a letter just like that that's in the Bible. It's called Titus. The guy writes a letter to Titus. It's in the Bible. Does Titus give you any commandments to follow? Any way to follow your life? No, the commandments are already spelled out for you in the Torah. But what Titus does is give you some understanding and context around those commandments. So it's important to us. You hold it dear to yourself. Obey God. In the Mishnah Torah, it states that the people of Israel did not believe in Moses because of the miracles he performed. Indeed, one who believes because of miracles retains a measure of doubt in his heart, since a miracle can be done by trickery or sorcery. Do you guys realize that you can do miracles by trickery or sorcery? It's a fact, right? Pharaoh, Aaron's rod turns into snakes, or Moses' rod turns into snakes, and then so does the Egyptian, sorcerers. Their rods turn into snakes. Okay, you can mimic and do the same thing. But rather, all the miracles he performed in the desert were by necessity, not to prove his prophecy. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? The guy didn't perform miracles just to prove to you that he was a prophet. The miracle happened upon him because he had no choice. Therefore, think about it. Oh, crap. We're stuck up against a big, huge lake, and I've got the armies of Egypt behind us. What do we do, Moses? I have no idea. But what I'm going to do is raise my hands to God, and I'm just going to pray. It's almost like the dude gave up. What do we do? I don't know. I give up. That's what you do to police officers. Put your hands up. Moses gave up. He put his hands up. And in fact, he gave up so much, he said, hey, you and you, come over here and hold my hands up. I give up so much that I don't want my arms to drop. Hold my arms up. I give up to you all that I am. I have nothing. I am no one. And we are all about to die. Save us. And I will hold my hands this high until the last person saved. I beseech you, God. And God responds. It's not his miracle. God responded to a desperate man who was praying. Father, we are thirsty. We have nothing to drink in this desert place. Our children will die. Strike the rock. God responds to a desperate man. He's not responding. Moses the prophet isn't performing miracles because he's trying to prove to people that he wants to be the prophet and you follow him. That's not why Moses the prophet's doing miracles. Moses the prophet is realizing miracles that God is performing. The church today goes after men who they say perform miracles. That man is a healer. That man is a prophet. Forget that. God will perform a miracle in your desperate state because he needs to. Because you cry out to him, because you say, I am a desperate man. And your will be done in my life, whether it is to live or whether it is to die, whether these Egyptians behind us will take us, I give my life up to you, I throw my hands up. It's your will. It just so happened that God enjoyed his heart. It just so happened that God appreciated that man's heart so deeply that he saved all of them. And the church rebels against this man. Think about it. Against Moses, against what God gave Moses. They rebel against it. Even to this day. So here, to continue the Mishnah, it says, all miracles he performed in the desert were by necessity, not to prove his prophecy. It was necessary to drown the Egyptians. Okay? He split the sea and then submerged them in it. They needed food, so he brought down manna. They thirsted, so he split the rock. All necessity. Korach and his company denied his authority. Whose? Moses's, but more importantly, God's. So the earth swallowed them up, and the same with all other miracles. The miracles are performed out of necessity, not out of proving to anyone anything. Why? Because God has no reason to prove to you anything. God doesn't have to prove to you or to me or to anyone that he's God. He's God. What he does do is perform miracles for those who he enjoys their hearts. He loves their spirit. He guides and directs them, and he makes promises to people. He enjoyed and appreciated Abraham's heart, so he made a promise to Abraham that he will make him his descendants number as the sands of the seashore, and that he'll always continually protect them. He made a promise to his son Isaac, a promise to his son Jacob, a promise to Jacob's 12 sons. He made promises to men that he believed were righteous and holy and good, and that could bring about goodness and propagate it on the earth. And he performed miracles out of necessity to continue his promise. He needed to perform miracles to support the promises that he made. Not because he has to prove that he's God, but because he is God and what he says is true. And when he said it, he had to support it. And if he allows the children of Israel and Moses to die at the edge of the Red Sea, his promise is broken. And he would not allow that to happen. It's really basic. Super simple. I got a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to go through it. What I think this message today is about, this parasha, we have to understand that the foundations which we are, our belief, our way of life is different. It's different because we believe in Yeshua as the Messiah. But there's millions of people that believe and follow the way we do. The difference between us and them is that we believe Yeshua is the Messiah and we follow that way. Is following the Jewish way the right way? It is when it's following God. If now you convert to following man, you're no different from Datan and Aviram. So if you do things that are Jewish just because you want to be Jewish, you got a problem. But if you do the things that God commands you to do because you want to be in the presence of the Most High God, and you know that this is what He told you to do in order to be protected, in order to be blessed and not be cursed, and be in His presence forever in eternity, to bring the spiritual to the physical, to make good on the earth, those are the reasons why we do the things we do, then it makes total sense. But you have to be enveloped, encompassed by it. You have to allow it to own you. You have to allow it to embrace you. You have to let it consume you to really make a difference in your life. Be consumed by the presence of God daily. I told my wife the other day, I have a general feeling of being unwell. It's probably stress. Like I just generally don't feel well. I can perform my day, I can go to work, I can do my job and my duties, but I don't feel well inside. I don't feel well. My head, my chest, my body, it doesn't feel well. Well, I'm surrounded by the ungodly all day. I have to allow God to consume me. I believe that if I move into the presence of God daily and more often, that general feeling of unwellness will go away. It will flee. I'm consumed by my feeling of being unwell, which propagates new feelings of being unwell. But if you're consumed by being in the presence of the Most High God, and you want to be with Him more and more, the distractions of the things in the physical around you will move away because you make the physical the spiritual. If your spirit is well, nothing can harm you. I've used my grandma a million times. My grandmother's spirit was well. And all the physical ailments she had in her life never seemed to me, as her grandson, to harm her. She's laid up in my parents' house, basically dying but still smiling. When you talk to her, she'd say, "I love you." Even when you saw her in the hospital before she passed away, she seemed like she had her mind. She was well. You didn't believe she was going to die. She seemed well because she was in the presence of God. I believe it with all my heart. She was a strong woman in the presence of God at all times. My grandmother was a great woman. You ignore the things of the physical because your spiritual is stronger than those things. This is what we have to do. We have to build our spirit strong so that the physical does not overcome us. The way you build your spirit strong is you get closer to God. The way you get closer to God is through prayer and understanding who He is. It's no different from a relationship with your friends or your family or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your husband or your wife. You have to learn who they are, and you develop a relationship. And I forget, Brian the other day or somebody was preaching that we don't always get along, right? My wife and I. Well, Jason did it in his teaching. I remember. It was Jason. We don't always get along, Well, yeah, you get to know each other. There's things about each other you don't like, but guess what? You love each other regardless. I can tell you there's things about Mike that God probably doesn't like. But he loves me, and I love him. You just have to keep developing and strengthening that relationship through prayer and through whatever form that you need to. They used to have sacrifices. Now you sacrifice yourself. You sacrifice your time. You sacrifice your time in prayer and study and obligation to him. That's the sacrifice we have. Worship. We can't be like Korach's rebellion and his company of men. We can't deny what God has established through Moses. We have to know who we are. Dad and Stephen started to spell out who we are, why we live our lives the way we do, why we follow the things we do, what's important to you. There's other modim, there's other life cycle events as well that we do. But why do we do those things? It gives you an idea of what you do, that it comes from the Scripture. It's not just something that we're making up. It's not just a Jewish thing. It's a scriptural thing. You do it because God commands you to do it. You can't rebel against what God has established. And if you start rebelling against the ways of God, the commandments of God, you're no different from the rebellion of Korach. That's it. It is our duty to praise the Master of all, to ascribe the greatness to the author of creation. For he made us unlike the nations of the lands. He's not placed us unlike the families of the earth. He's not made our portion like theirs, and our lot like all their multitudes. We bend the knee and bow and acknowledge our thanks before the King of Kings. The Holy One, blessed is he. He stretches out heaven. He establishes earth's foundation. The seat of his glory is in the heavens above, and the presence of his power is in the most exalted heights. He's our God, there's none other. True is our King, there's nothing beside him. As it is written in his Torah, you shall know this day and take to your heart that the Lord, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth below. There is none other.